Okay, hi everybody, and welcome back to my series of lectures on gamification for the course. My apologies for this one taking a little bit longer than I wanted to getting it out. So what we're going to be looking at today are some examples of gamification. The first thing to know about gamification is where the word actually comes from. And it was coined in 2002 by Nick Pelling. And he originally said that he wanted the word to be unwieldy and a little bit ugly. It wasn't until after his company actually collapsed that the word was picked up, however, and it was picked up and turned into a major trend. However, the idea behind it, if we take from the last lecture, the definition of use of game-like elements in non-game situations has been around for very much longer. How much longer, you might ask? Well, the first example of it that we can really see is from the Longitude Act of 1714. And what this was it is very difficult to calculate where a ship is uh, in terms of longitude when out in the middle of the ocean without any uh, any markers to help. So there was a disaster in which the British Navy lost between 4 and 5 warships because they ran into a known sandbank because they didn't know what longitude they were at. So the British government instituted a prize, a grand prize, for whoever could figure out how to solve this problem, how to create a method of measuring longitude. Um, and it was open to anyone. It was open to the general public. This is one of the grand prize competition styles, and they have been in existence uh, from this point onward. There have been different ones from this one to the creation of the canned goods to the SpaceX prize. But we might talk a little bit more about those later. So this is the very first example of the use of game elements, namely the competition element, in a very non-game situation. The next one The next one is when we see the Sears catalog come out. Before we had Amazon, we actually had the Sears catalog, which posted out their catalog to homes all over the United States from 1886 onward, and sold things ranging originally from watches to eventually selling full-on motor cars and homes. You could actually buy a house from the catalog and it would be delivered to you as a kit. Now, this was a precursor to the gamification element that we're going to talk about, which are the 1930s green stamps, which are pictured here. And these were a new form of currency. If you bought a certain amount of things from specific catalogs, they had a loyalty system where you could collect the stamps. And the stamps could be redeemed for different discounts and different elements inside of the catalog. Now, what was interesting is that it wasn't made apparent what the value of the stamps were. The stamps value fluctuated depending on what it was that the company was attempting to move more quickly. But again, we have an example of this prime gamification element of collecting stuff that earns you other stuff appearing as early as the 1930s. The one that everybody really knows, the sort of prototypical gamification, dates back all the way to 1979, the year in which I was actually born. And it's the frequent flyer programs. In these programs, You collect points for how far you've gone, and you're then able to trade in these points for different perks and benefits. We'll be talking more about perks and benefits in the next lecture. What's interesting about these is that if you look into the situation at the moment, the frequent flyer point programs are more valuable to the credit card companies that offer them than the actual flights themselves. I believe American Airways one year posted that they were making more money from their frequent flyer point system and their deals with the credit card companies than they were making by giving people seats on airplanes. Now we start moving into the modern stage, and we come across the first widely studied and modern example of gamification, which is Foursquare. And Foursquare was a precursor to all the location apps that we have nowadays, where you sign in and you mark that you've been there and you can leave a review and all sorts of lovely things like this. But it succeeded where other apps had failed by setting up a system where you could become the mayor of that particular place. And people started to compete to become mayors of that place. And you started to collect badges and you started to be able to share your knowledge about what was happening in the world around you. And it became incredibly popular and so was studied extensively as a model for what to do next. After this point, from about the 2009 onward, we started to see an explosion of gamification applications and gamification sites and gamification tools. I've pulled a couple of them together onto this slide. The first one that you see is the speed camera lottery. And what this was is a system where if you are caught speeding, normally you're given a fine. In this particular case, they instituted a program where if you were under the speed limit, a photograph would be taken of your car, and you would be entered into a prize draw and had the opportunity to win some of the money that was raised through the fines on people who were speeding. What they found was that this decreased the amount of speeding in the particular area and was more likely to encourage drivers to drive carefully. Right next to it we have Samantha Bee, who gamified the 2016 elections in the United States to try to encourage people to know who their candidates were and what they stood for and get people to know more about the system. This could be, I haven't seen any evidence for it yet, but I'm sure somebody is studying how much of an effect this potentially had on the blue wave of the 2018 election, not the 2016 election, the blue wave of the midterm elections of 2018. Underneath, we have Fitocracy, which is a gamified system that encourages people to go to the gym and record their workouts and the activities that they're doing, and gives people an opportunity to compete with each other and to socially share their elements together. Class Dojo, where teachers are able to give points in real time to students and to ensure that students understand what it is they're getting rewarded for. Duolingo, a app that helps you teach languages, helps you to learn languages, my apologies, and Yelp, where you can review the various things that are available or in your local area. All of these use different elements of gamification together and different types of games to create this entire idea. So it's very clear that gamification, while the term is rather new, has existed with humanity for quite a long time in a variety of different forms. What's interesting is the games that are used specifically in these type of situations. And Zuckerman, in his book Gamification by Design, outlined 6 types of games that he saw being used. The first was the grand challenges. These are things like Longitude, which we talked about earlier, SpaceX, and one of my favorite ones, which is, of course, the Randi Foundation Challenge. The Randi Foundation Challenge is worth mentioning because they offered $1 million to anyone who could go and, under test conditions, exhibit supernatural powers. It was never collected, which makes me wonder, if you could exhibit supernatural abilities, why didn't you go and pick up an easy payday? The next one is rapid feedback systems, also known sometimes as nudge systems. Things like Class Dojo, Duolingo, Photocracy, they're all designed to nudge and move the behavior of the person in a particular way efficiently. Simulations are all about simulating the actual environment, the things that you're going to be doing, or the things that are serious to be doing, and taking them onto an online environment to help the player to actually enjoy them. Status marathons, air miles, frequent flyer points, all are about increasing your level of status over a long period of time. Commercial negotiation, these are simulated economies, very similar to the stamp system, where you are collecting one resource and then you are trading one resource for another resource. There has been some interesting studies on the economy of EVE Online and the economy crashes of a couple of the MMORPGs that are fascinating to read if you get the chance. And finally, we have these sort of expressive games, the games where you're trying to express yourself, express your emotions, express your feelings. In this area, we would have things like Words with Friends or Farmville or any of those ones where the purpose is to socially express yourself. So, just to review, we've looked at today examples of gamification. We've quickly gone over the history of gamification being used even before the term came into existence. We've looked at a couple of quick examples of different styles of gamification out there. And we've looked at the 6 basic games that Zuckerman identified as being used primarily in gamification. So, as always, if you have questions, please feel free to drop me a line or get on the forums on Moodle. And up next, and our week 3 lecture will be about reward systems and reward schedules. How do you create rewards specifically for the player who is inside your system? As always, please stay safe. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.